Hi everybody. My name is Kat Scheffler and this is Cox Talks. I've never done a live video on YouTube before, so this will be kind of different. I don't totally know how it works. But I'm going to go ahead and do a video on head racing. So the intention with this video is kind of for beginners, like if this is your very first head race, and the basics, and then kind of move into maybe some intermediate calls. But I'm going to do a separate video on Head of the Charles for advanced calls and steering, probably within the next week because Head of the Charles is coming up. So if you have questions, please comment to let me know that you're here so I know if that's how this works. But otherwise, let's get into some head racing. So if you are going to do a race this fall season, that would be called a head race. And if you don't know what that is, think more like long distance running or marathon running versus sprinting. So that's done a kind of different way than, like, you know, if you do a sprint race, all of the boats are lined up next to each other and they all start at the same time, and you can see who's winning based off of who's ahead and, you know, who's behind. But with head racing, they just start one boat at a time, maybe like every 10 seconds, and it's timed, so it's a little bit different. But the things that you're going to need to know if you're about to go out on your very first head race, especially it's probably your first race if it's also your first head race, so you might be a little bit nervous. You need to know your event number. All these things your coach is going to tell you. Your event number, what time your event is, and your bow number, because every boat's going to have a different bow number, and that's how they're going to be able to time you guys coming through. The race starts with a rolling start. So instead of everyone starting at a dead stop and then you go for a piece, ready, go, there's going to be kind of like funneling you guys into the start, and that's why you need to know your event and your time and your bow number, because say your event number 3 and you know, it's supposed to be at 9:10, then at 9:10 you need to be ready. Really, you should be there 5 to 10 minutes before your race, so you're going to be around the start 5 to 10 minutes till 9:10. And if there's 10 people and 10 boats in your event, then you're going to have all these different bow numbers, and you might be bow number 26, and 25 is going to go before you and 27 is going to go after you, and you're going to kind of be aware of where the other boats are so that you can get in line, and then the officials will call you up to the start. The start will have like a specific buoy or official boat or something that's the actual like start line that you'll be aware of, but you're going to a rolling start is when you start rowing before you hit that line, and you want to build up to full speed because your time starts the second your bow crosses that start line, and you don't want to be like building into power for those first 3 strokes. So before you get to that start line, you are going to call your boat up to power. So maybe you're paddling towards it and you'll make a call like build it up or build on this one, and your boat is supposed to build to full power. Kind of gauge how far away you need to do that. You don't want to do it from 300 meters away, because then it's going to take 3 to 5 strokes to build up to full power, and you're full power, and you're still full power, and you're still full power, and then you finally go through the start line. It's okay if you do it a little bit longer, but that's extra work that they kind of had to do, so you want to try to do it, maybe judge how long it's going to take you to build up to full power, and most of the time that's about how much room you're going to have anyway. You're not going to have a ton of room, so when they call you up is when you will build up to full power, and then let your boat know when you've actually crossed that start line, and when they're on, you can say you're on, and our bow is through the start. Yeah, that's how the race is going to start. For steering in a head race, I've talked about it in my other videos if you've seen them before, that for new coxswains, steering is your #1 goal and priority, and it's the most important thing you can do, and that is so true in a head race. The steering is very important in a head race to the time that the boat ultimately gets, because if you steer really wonky or really wide, you're adding meters and therefore adding time to the boat, and how long they can get through the course. So focus on steering, especially if you're new and you're not as comfortable doing all of these things at once. I'll give you other things to work on too, but primarily focus on steering. It's better just to have a really good course and be quiet than to be distracted by trying to make calls and having a really bad course. So I'm gonna talk about calls, but know your own level, and as much as you need to focus on steering, do that. Ways that you can work on your steering, know that the closer you are to the shore or the turns, the inside of the course is going to be the shorter course. So we want that course, the shortest course, of course. I said that a lot. But there are some caveats to that. When we are maybe approaching a buoy that we have to make a turnaround, if you come right up next to it, like here's the buoy, if you are like, oh, I'm going to stay really close to it, you can't start turning your bow at all until your stern basically clears that buoy, which means that you have to go straight until you're past the buoy, and then you have to start turning, and it takes you really long, and then that ends up being a longer course anyway. So there's 2 ways to kind of think about steering around a buoy. There's either kind of if you just stay a little bit wider out, and that way you can start turning before you get to it, and then you come like this, or you can even think of it as like a 2-point turn. I wonder if that, and almost like if we have a buoy, this is my lovely buoy, and you come kind of make your first turn here and then straighten out, so it's like turning this way and then turning that way a little bit. So if that kind of makes sense, ultimately that will kind of work, or you can kind of go a little bit rounder like that. Hello, viewer. So anyway, getting back on track. So the other caveat to steering, taking the tightest course, is that the faster boats in a head race get the right of way. So if you are the faster boat, and otherwise known as the passing boat, you would naturally get and try to take the inside turn and the shortest course. But if you are the slower boat, the boat being passed, be aware that the other boat gets the right of way, they get the inside turn, and you have to what's called yield your course. Know that when you're going through a bridge or you're going around a turn, that as the slower boat, you take the wider course. You don't have to go crazy wide or something, but you do have to allow for that boat to have room to get through. And I remember I did not know that in my first couple head races, and I remember some coxswain of, I think it was a master's boat, yelling at me after a turn, like, "Coxswain, you need to yield," and I had no idea what she was talking about. Completely confused. So that's what that was about. I look back, I'm like, oh, I just was like, yeah, I'm gonna steer great and take this inside turn. I had no idea that they, as the faster boat, should have gotten that inside turn. They get the priority so that their time isn't affected by our kind of basically getting in their way. That kind of brings me to my next point, which is this is how head racing works. So we talked about how it's a rolling start, and there's one boat that goes every 5-10 seconds, whatever they decide that it needs to be. So if, going back to the example that I'm bow number 26, the boat in front of me was bow number 25, and the boat behind me is 27. If I am faster than the boat in bow number 25, then I'm going to pass them along the course, which head racing is several thousand meters. So typically they're like maybe a 5K. And so if I'm faster than them, I'm probably going to catch and pass them, which would put my bow number at 26 ahead of 25. So if you have family watching, or you just want to watch a head race, that's how you can tell if a boat is fast or slow. If the boat in chronological order is further back, if boat number 2 is back behind 36, 36 was definitely faster and 2 fell behind. Okay, head racing, steering. Again, steering is the most important, but let's move into calls. So again, I'm going to start with calls for beginners and basics, but I can build off of that. If you're super nervous because this is your first head race, or your first race, particularly if it's your first race, and you have no idea what calls to make, think firstly about some of the things that you've said in practice. I think the first thing to think about is your tone of voice, because especially as a new coxswain, it's really hard to understand how assertive and aggressive and how low your voice needs to get. And in practice, your coaches or your fellow coxswains or rowers maybe have tried to tell you about a coxswain voice. It becomes exponentially more important in a race setting. So in a daily practice where I might use more of like my speaking coxswain voice, which is like, I don't know, into like races, you get really guttural and you're like kind of yelling, even if you have your cox box working. You still are like trying to give so much energy and aggressiveness because that's how you want them to row. So that makes sense. There's a disconnect if you're coxing like a cheerleader, or like you're very, like, oh, this is a practice piece. They're probably going to row like it's a practice rather than it's a race. So you want to kind of step up your tone of voice and try to bring that really, really low and really loud. If you are uncomfortable with the level of talking, I was talking to some novice coxswains earlier today, and one of their main questions was, how much do I talk in a head race? And that's, kind of depends, because I would say to talk for the majority of the race, it's better to say something than to say nothing, but it's also better to say less of quality than to say more of just babbling and rambling. So kind of find that balance. Again, always go back, steering's more important, but you do want to try to speak often. But if you have no idea what to say and you're just going to be saying kind of nonsense, I don't think it's a bad thing to be quiet for a few strokes. Just every few strokes, try to come up with something to add. The things that maybe you can try to remember to say, first of all, I would say plan it out the night before. Think through before your race in your head what the race is going to be like. So if you just go out there and wing it, it's really, really hard to think on your feet. That's something that rowers don't appreciate about coxswains as much, is that it's really, really hard when you're doing all of these things to like think of what to say. But it really helps if you plan it out and write it out the night before. And even though you're not going to know exactly how the race is going to go, you can kind of envision the course and maybe think through like how you want to start, what you want to say in the beginning as you're building up strokes. Maybe think of some different things. So if you want some suggestions, I would say that power 10s are a really good go-to. I would be careful how many we use. I think some coxswains tend to overuse them. So if you have a 5K, I would say like max 3 power 10s, because if you're throwing a power 10 every 20 or 30 strokes, that's too many, because that's just called rowing hard. They lose their power, figuratively and literally. So trying to space those out. You can use them either when you're passing another boat. That's a good time to use a power 10. Or if, maybe you're not really around any boats and you just want to like bring that focus back internally, you can use a power 10. If you don't know what a power 10 is, kind of what it sounds like. It's 10 strokes that everyone in the boat is committing to being more powerful. So that really helps kind of pick up the speed, because everyone's always supposed to be rowing hard, but you want them to be harder at the same time, so it really sends the boat. Another good call that you could make is ratio. Even if you're not super comfortable knowing yet when to call for ratio, there's a pretty good bet that they're going to need it. So you can call a ratio shift, especially, if you talk to your stroke seat. If you're in an 8, your stroke seat can tell you what they're feeling. So they might call for ratio, and then you will reiterate that. A ratio is literally the ratio of the recovery to the drive. And in low rate, you want that to be like a 3-to-1 ratio, 3 beats on the recovery and 1 beat through the water on the drive. Races tend to be a little more 2-to-1. Head racing has slightly lower rates, so still just think about longer on the slide, quicker on the drive. So you can make ratio shifts, which should bring people's focus back to slowing down the slide and being quicker through the water. You can also say that. You can use other words for ratio shift, like slow down the slide, or hold your timing coming up, or quick, or quicker through the water, press through the water. All of these things, that helps kind of like fill the space that they're listening to, help distract them from being in pain and being tired, kind of keep their minds focused on something, and also getting the entire boat to focus on one thing at the same time. Having all 4 people or all 8 people thinking about quicker through the water, okay, quicker through the water, okay, slow down the arms away and slow down the slide. You can tell them the rate, you can tell them how many minutes they've been rowing, tell them information. These are informative calls, and it really is good to tell rowers information so that they are not sitting there wondering, what rate are we? Like, are we too high? How long has it been? Are we halfway through? I personally tend to hold off on how many minutes it's been or where we are until we're about halfway through, because I think that sometimes that early stuff, if you're like, okay, we're 1,000 meters in of a 5K, can be a little disheartening. So I try to wait until little bit later, closer to 2K, 2.5K. But yeah, knowing how many meters you've gone, if you know the halfway mark, look at the race course beforehand, or a map of it to be able to know where things are, so you can kind of mentally see how far into the course you are, because a halfway mark is a really good call. Or you know, even if they know the course, like coming up on the second bridge is a good call, so that they know where things are. You can also tell them where the other boats are. These are good informational calls that aren't technique calls, but they're really important. So rate, time, where we are, where other boats are, if you're coming up on another boat, especially if you're coming up on another boat, because that means that you're faster, right? That's really motivating. So, you know, if you were really far from a boat and now you're getting closer, just tell them that you're getting closer. Especially if you don't have a good gauge of distance, just say like, we're closer to that boat, that gap is smaller. We're closing the gap is what a lot of coxswains say. So you're closing the gap on the next boat in front of you. And then you can say we're even closer, till you get to the point where you can say, hey, there's about a boat length of open water between us. Now there's less. Now there's half a boat. Now we're, if your boat and their boat like kind of overlap, that's great. Like that's, you know, you're faster than them. They want to know that. That's really motivating. So you can say you have contact on that boat. That's a little more advanced call, but why not use it? Just bow to stern is also what that means. So your bow is to their stern. Your bow to stern on that boat. And then you can call that you're passing them. You're walking on them is what that's called. If you're going through the other boat, you're walking. And totally, that's an awesome one. Super easy way to fill space. Make sure that they're not looking out of the boat to see if they're passing that boat. Have them stay focused, and you can look and you can say, okay, now I'm even with that coxswain, or now I'm on their foreseat, or now I'm halfway down their boat, and now I'm on their bow deck, bow ball. So those are really fun. That's the most fun thing to call in a race ever. Where other boats are. But when in doubt, you've made all of the informative calls, you told them the time and the rate, and you don't want to keep calling rate, and you've already made a ratio call, and you think the ratio is pretty good. What are other things that you can say? Firstly, I recommend watching coxswain recordings, because I think that's a really good way to learn some. But some other go-tos that I like, variations on catch, send, because that doesn't, it's like a filler for me. It's something that you can say while you're maybe thinking about something else, or just to kind of fill in some of that space, is you say it when they do it. So when their blade is catching, or I should specify, when the stroke seat's blade is catching, that's when you want to say catch. And when the stroke seat's blade comes out, it's when you want to say send or release. So catch, release, place, send. So there's a lot of variations on these. You can repeat them. I say 2 or 3 times max. Don't keep saying catch, send, catch, send, catch, send, catch, send. That gets really annoying, but you can say other things. Let's see, in, out, go, right here, that kind of thing. And you can say those multiple times throughout the race. I just wouldn't say it more than 2 or 3 times in a row. Is there any other ones? Oh, push, pull, same idea, but that one's, the drive is pushing, finish with the hands is pull. Right here, right now, attack. I like that one. That was one of the ones I used a lot when I was a novice coxswain, because I like that idea of like, attack this stroke. I don't know. I can't remember what else I said. But like kind of like attacking the stroke, attacking the drive, pushing, press, go. So those are just calls that kind of help focus, bring attention to certain things, but also if you're using your tone correctly as a coxswain, they can be motivating just because of like the way you're saying it. So again, be aware of that. Be aware of your tone. Make sure your voice is really low and assertive. I know one other question that I got today from a novice coxswain was related to this idea of talking too much and how much do you talk. She said, like, oh, I've been told that it's annoying to the rowers when I'm talking too much, and it's like too inspirational and like annoying. And to that I would say it's about the quality of what you're saying. In practices, in steady state, never be afraid to be quiet, because it's just steady state. They're just going. You don't need to talk to them the whole time. In a race, you want to try to talk more, but you have to be aware of not coming across like you're trying to be a cheerleader. Like if you're just like, go, go, you can do it. Yeah, I would get annoyed with that when I'm trying to work really hard too. So keeping your voice low, keeping calm but assertive. And again, you can be quiet for a few strokes, but try to bring back maybe a focus on the ratio, or you can make technique that your coach has been working on. If your coach the last 2 weeks has been focusing on something, use that. You know, say like, work on the body swing, if that's what you've been working on. Make everybody think about that in the boat. Or if your coach has been working on, you know, rolling up at a certain point, squaring up, use that. Say like, come on everybody, get their blades squared. The set, I would like make a call for set, but don't spend the whole race focusing on set, because if you do that, they're gonna do that, and that means they're not pulling hard, because set's kind of important, but it's also not the end of the world. So if you're down on one side and you've made a call for set and you're like, you know, fix the set, just be like, yeah, it's fine. You know, just keep going. Keep focusing on other things. You know, row hard anyway. We can still row hard. Things to avoid saying. I got called out on this in a practice piece. My novice here was something along the lines of like, come on, like, we're still in this. And that goes back to being an annoying, like, cheerleader rather than like aggressive coach. You're part of the boat, so don't you want to say something that's kind of trying to be positive but actually is kind of negative, because if you think about it, saying we're still in this means that we're losing. So that's actually kind of disheartening. Other things like that, you know, we're almost done. Sounds positive, disheartening, because it's like, oh yeah, like we're really, this is really hard. Like we're really slow and we still have some left. Positive spins would be how much is left, like the last 200 meters, or we've made it through the last bridge. It's just like a slightly different connotation, because if you're like, you know, I don't know, don't give up, it's like, you know, you kind of want to give up, because it's like, man, this is hard, man, this sucks, especially if you're in a boat that's not doing well, and sometimes novices aren't doing well, and you want to try to keep it positive, and just focus on technique then. Focus back on something, focus on, you know, taking a power 10, or focusing on ratio, or something, rather than like, come on, just get through this. That's probably not what we want to say. So if you have any questions, I can take those. If not, that's pretty much all I can think of. More advanced intermediate calls, I definitely highly recommend watching coxswain recordings, and I will do one for Head of the Charles coming up. Work on your coxswain voice, focus on steering. That's my number one, number two, top two things. Steering, coxswain voice, low voice, even if you don't talk the whole time. All right, well, good luck in your head races this season, and yeah, let me know. Subscribe, let me know what you want next, or if you have any questions, I'm happy to hear from you and respond. So again, this is my first live video. I don't know how to turn it off. Sorry guys. How do I turn it off? There we go. All right, bye.